Hey everyone, Road Breach here, and today we're taking a look at Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted. Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted is a virtual reality horror game developed by Steelwool Studios and published by Scott Games for PC and PlayStation 4 on May 28, 2019, and Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and Oculus Quest for the following year in May through October. This was Steelwool Studios' first Five Nights at Freddy's game, and it's generally held up as a great game that reinvigorated the franchise for many fans of the series. So, does this game hold up today? Well, let's punch in and see what this game has to offer. I'm playing this on the PlayStation VR. It is possible to play this game without a VR headset, at least on console to my knowledge. But if I was going to do that, then I wouldn't have bought a PlayStation VR for it. In terms of visuals, it's much better on PC, but the PlayStation VR version does look alright. My main problem with the visuals is mainly the lighting. Some things that should be casting shadows just don't, and the textures and resolution are a little blurry. That said, the character models are incredibly accurate to their original games. I wouldn't be surprised if Scott gave Steelwool the original models from the series for them to use here, because these are way closer to the original games than the SFM models people used in YouTube animations once upon a time. The locations are on point too, and being able to see these locations in 3D allows you to see how big these rooms are supposed to be. The way the Five Nights at Freddy's offices were presented in the original trilogy made them look really big, and it's pretty weird to see them being far smaller than I thought. But it's not just the first three games that are accounted for here, as the bedroom and plush trap hallway from FNAF 4 are here too, and they're faithfully recreated. There are also some original areas like the vent and hub area that feel like they could have come from any game Scott could have made from the series. And since it's Five Nights at Freddy's, we should probably talk about the jump scares. The jump scares are very effective for the most part. The characters use the original sound bites from the OG games, and if they aren't using the ones from the games, they're using loud sounds that often scared the hell out of me. And since these are in VR, the animation is locked to your point of view, so you can't look away when you get jump scared. One thing I wasn't crazy about was the Night Marionette. The animation is fine, but the sound isn't loud enough to give you that sudden jolt that a good jump scare should. The Night Marionette is terrifying, but the sound it makes when it kills you isn't as effective as it should be. The game starts off with a little introduction with Hand Unit talking about the problems that Fazbear Entertainment had in the past, and that they would like to try and build a better reputation with customers in the digital age. So they've decided to recreate some of the ghost stories as a part of the Fazbear virtual experience. Odd way to try and make customers like your company again, but whatever. At the end of the introduction, you're given a waiver to agree to, and we're brought into the in-game menu, where you're given a choice to play the first three games, the Dark Rooms, Parts and Service, Vent Repair, and Night Terrors. It makes sense that the first three games would have their nights grouped together, but I also like that the other mini-games are separated by their themes, like the Dark Rooms needing some sort of illumination, be it a flashlight or beacon, and Night Terrors all taking place in the FNAF 4 bedroom. One thing I'm not too crazy about is the fact that all the mini-games, no matter what page they're on, have the same death screen from FNAF 1 when you lose at the minigame. And every time you win a minigame, you get a prize. It can be a snack, a toy based on one of the characters, a toy from the FNAF 4 bedroom, or a party favor, all of which you can look at when you go to the prize counter. But that's just the overview. How do these games actually play? Well, let's start off where it truly began, with Five Nights at Freddy's 1. In Five Nights at Freddy's, you need to survey the establishment until 6 AM. But the animatronics are left in a free roaming mode at night because their servo motors will lock up if they're left off for too long. Unfortunately, if they see you, they'll think you're a bare endoskeleton and try to shove you into an animatronic suit that's full of dangerous animatronic parts that will kill you. So in order to stop that from happening, you need to shut the doors when Bonnie or Chica come to your office. Why not just shut the doors and keep them closed all night? Well, because they'll drain your power if you keep them closed for too long, but luckily, Bonnie and Chica will leave after some time, so you can conserve some power. You can check the cameras to see where the animatronics are, but you can't see them when they're outside your doors, so you need to use the light to see if they're at your door. As the week progresses, the animatronics will become more aggressive, so you need to be more cautious and conservative with your power. On the second night, Foxy will get thrown into the mix. You need to check on him in Pirate Cove, and when he's not there, you need to close the left door. Freddy will also try to get you by standing in front of the right door, and he won't leave no matter how long you keep the door closed. I think you need to check on him frequently to keep him from getting to the door, but I can't stress enough how much I think that's how it works. So we did 4 of the 5 nights, but where's the 5th one? It's not on the console, so how do you access the 5th night? Oh, you just need to flip the breaker to play night 5. Okay. though they probably should have redesigned the console to fit all 5 nights on the screen. But I can understand why they decided to do this, because the other mini-games have a hard mode that's accessible via the breaker to the left of the console. And since the 5th night is the hardest night in your normal week, I guess Night 5 could be considered the hard mode. And that's not me just speculating, because Night 5 really is that difficult. This night will randomly open and close your doors at random, and turn on your lights to drain your power. And I felt like I just had to get lucky with Freddy draining my power. My biggest problem with these last 2 nights is that once Freddy is at your door, you cannot get rid of him. But I eventually beat Night 5, and I definitely feel that Steel Wool made this game scarier by putting it in VR. But I'm not the biggest fan of Night 5. But let's move on to Five Nights at Freddy's 2. FNAF 2 has you working at a new version of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza with more advanced animatronics that have access to a criminal database. I kind of find it funny that this place is supposedly improved when your office doesn't have doors. I know for a fact that any security office would have at least one door to keep customers out. That's just how it works. Anyway, you have a light to check the hallways and vents in your office, and the cameras, this time, have a light that you can turn on to check the darker rooms. I find this to be more cumbersome in VR because the position you're in has you bending your wrists in an uncomfortable way to hit the button. Thankfully, you can reset the play area by holding the start button on one of the Move controllers on PlayStation VR, so you can get into a spot that's more comfortable for your wrists. The first night starts you off with Toy Bonnie and the puppet to deal with. Toy Bonnie will make his way to your office through the right vent, which you can check via the camera or the light. If he gets into your office, you need to put on the Freddy mask until he goes away, which is the same for Toy Chica. You need to keep the puppet at bay by going to camera 11 and winding up the music box to keep the puppet asleep. The old animatronics are also here, but the only one you have to worry about for the time being is Foxy. The Freddy mask won't work on him, so you need to flicker your light at him when you see him in the hallway. Toy Freddy and Mangle will stand at the entrance of your office and eventually enter, which is when you need to put on the Freddy mask until they leave. The last animatronic that you have to deal with is Balloon Boy, who will deactivate your flashlight if he gets into your office, so you just need to put on the mask and he'll go away. On night 4, Phone Guy tells you that there's an investigation going on because the animatronics have been acting aggressive to the staff lately. This doesn't mean much for the gameplay because while I find that the animatronics do get more aggressive as the week progresses, it doesn't get that much more difficult, which also carries over to night 5. There's also an extra night called Withered that adds the rest of the Withered animatronics into the night that act similarly to the toy animatronics, but it seems that Bonnie and Freddy can be affected by the flashlight because they just disappeared sometimes when I checked the hallway. Before you start this night, you can change the difficulty with this little switch beside the button, but I just decided to leave it alone to see what the animatronics were like before I challenged myself. But since it is the end of the week, let's flip that hard switch and crank up the difficulty dial. The animatronics are definitely more aggressive here, but I was in the zone when I played the Withered Night on hard mode. Call it good motor memory, I guess. I also like that Phone Guy is like, "Hey buddy, you really shouldn't be here." FNAF 2 and Help Wanted is probably the most fun I've had in this game. It is a little cumbersome, but still executed pretty well, minus the clipping problem with the Freddys. FNAF 3 has you working at Fazbear Frights, a horror attraction that uses props from the old Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Since the system is old, one of 3 systems will go offline from time to time. If the camera system goes offline, you won't be able to use the cameras. If the audio devices go offline, you won't be able to use the audio lure. And if the ventilation goes offline, the screen will slowly flicker. If a system goes offline, you need to select the system that went offline and hit the button to reboot it. Night 1 has you rebooting the ventilation and camera system with no animatronics to worry about. I can see why this is here. It's to get the player acquainted with the mechanics, but I also feel it's kinda pointless to have a night where you have nothing to survive from in a survival horror game. Night 2 is where things start getting interesting, as you now have to deal with Springtrap, aka William Afton. He'll walk around the building trying to get to your office, so you need to keep track of him on the cameras and use the audio lure to keep him away from you. But you can't just use the audio lure that's furthest away from you. You need to use it on a camera that's adjacent to where Springtrap is and methodically lure him away from you. He'll also try to crawl into the vent to get to you, which you can see on the monitor to your far right. You can seal the vent with the vent button on the console to keep Springtrap from getting through the vent. But Springtrap is not the only thing you have to look out for, because you also have the Phantom animatronics to deal with. The Phantom animatronics are hallucinations that will show up if you don't keep the ventilation on. Phantom Balloon Boy will show up on your main cameras, and you just need to quickly switch to another camera before he jump scares you and deactivates the vents. I don't know what to do about Phantom Foxy besides looking at him to get rid of him, and Foxy will deactivate some systems if he jump scares you. Mangle will also show up in the vent cameras, and you need to... Mangle, what pronouns do you use? And you need to quickly switch cameras, otherwise they'll jump scare you and deactivate some of your systems. I didn't encounter Freddy or Chica, because they'll show up if you don't reboot the ventilation system, and I made sure to reboot it the second it went off. While you progress through the week, you get played some audio tapes on how to use spring-lock suits, animatronics that can be worn as suits, which I think is a fascinating concept in this franchise, especially with how dangerous they can be if they aren't maintained.
Welcome to your new career as a performer/entertainer for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. These tapes will provide you with much-needed information on how to handle/climb into/climb out of mascot costumes. Right now we have 2 specially designed suits that double as both animatronic and suit. So please pay close attention while learning how to operate these suits, as accidents/injuries/death/irreparable and grotesque maiming can occur. When using an animatronic as a suit, please ensure that the animatronic parts are tightly compressed and fastened by the spring locks located around the inside of the suit. It may take a few moments. Position your head and torso between these parts in a manner where you can move and speak. Try not to nudge or press against any of the spring locks inside the suit. Do not touch the spring locks at any time. Do not breathe on the spring locks, as moisture may loosen them and cause them to break loose. In the case that the spring locks come loose while you are wearing a suit, please try to maneuver away from populated areas before bleeding out, as to not ruin the customer experience.
Fazbear Entertainment, giving OSHA the middle finger since 1983. One thing I'm not a fan of here is how the screen will slowly flicker when the ventilation system is offline. I get that it's supposed to represent asphyxiation due to lack of proper airflow, but it gets really annoying when I'm trying to reboot a system or lure Springtrap and I can't see what I'm doing. Though I do like how the final night is made to look like it's on fire, as a nod to the location's demise in the original game. FNAF 3 is good, but it's not without its annoyances. And this is where I feel like I need to give each minigame special attention, because things start getting far more varied. The first minigame for the dark rooms is fun with Plush Trap that works similar to red light, green light. You need to shine your flashlight on Plush Trap to start the minigame, and wait 8 seconds for him to move before you use the flashlight again. Do that 4 times, then wait 5 or 6 seconds to get him onto the X. Balloon Boy works similarly, but he moves every 5 or 6 seconds, and you need to wait 4 seconds when he's close to you to get him onto the X. The next minigame has you shining your flashlight at baby plushies to stop them from getting to you. Sounds easy, right?
Wrong!
There's no sound cues for some of their movements, and you need to look all over the room to find them. There are sounds you can hear which will give you an idea on where you need to shine your flashlight, but they aren't specific for some. That said, 2 helpful sound cues that I like are the cabinet doors close to the floor, and the stool that will wobble when a plush is on the shelf or walking to you on the left counter. Another thing that makes this minigame difficult is the flashlight battery that you need to avoid using too much of. The battery will recharge by itself if you leave it off, and it won't drain if you turn it on for a split second, but you still need to be very conservative with your power usage, especially since the plushies become more aggressive as it gets closer to 6 AM. As a side note, I do like that the Move controllers are rod-shaped and have a big button on the top, so it actually kind of feels like I'm holding a real flashlight. It's a nice little immersive touch to these minigames. The last Dark Rooms minigame has you crossing Funtime Auditorium to get to Parts and Service on the other side of the room. But Funtime Foxy is also in here, so you need to flash the beacon to stun him and avoid bumping into him. I do have a few issues with this minigame. 1. Movement on the PlayStation VR is kinda awkward, as you need to push the move button while pointing your head in the direction you want to move. And 2, after I used the flash beacon, I'd sometimes get locked in place for a second and had to fight it to move again. It's just a strange bug that shouldn't be in an otherwise easy minigame. Hard mode makes the waiting duration for Plush Trap and Balloon Boy shorter and adds stuff that makes it harder to see them. Plush Trap isn't too bad, but Balloon Boy has all these balloons in the way that can cover up the timer. The Plush Baby minigame now has all the plushies replaced with baby, and you now have to find scrap baby plushies. This is considerably harder than before, because scrap baby plushies have small details that are different from the normal baby plushies, which aren't easy to spot. Both of the Plush Baby minigames took me many tries to finally beat both of them, so I had to use the built-in share button to get footage of me beating them. If I used my capture card, then I would have had tons of useless footage with no more storage space to keep useful footage. The difference with Funtime Foxy on hard mode is that you need to deal with Lolbit, who seems more aggressive, and you need to avoid Funtime Freddy and Foxy. I did die here, but it's not that much more difficult than the normal version. Next up is parts and service, which is probably my favorite part of the game. Being able to see the animatronics moving around is already really cool, but being able to tinker with the animatronics is even better. Each repair has you listening to hand units' instructions and reacting accordingly, but each repair is different, so let's talk about each one individually. The first animatronic you need to repair is Bonnie, and you need to open up his face and listen to the notes of his guitar and tune the string that's out of tune. One tricky part of this repair is reconciling which eye you need to remove and which cleaning receptacle you need to put it in when opening up Bonnie's face. You need to put his left eye in the cleaning receptacle to your left, and you need to do the same thing with his right eye. But it's his right and left with his eyes, and it's your left and right with the cleaning receptacles. The next animatronic to repair is Chica. You need to clean her off by removing pizza slices and killing bugs with pesticides, and reattach her arm. But Mr. Cupcake is going to make your job harder by running off, and you gotta catch him and put him back on the plate. This may be a weird spot to talk about this particular aspect of the game, and it's not the first time this happened, but there's a small chance that when you receive a prize, you'll instead get jump scared by Plush Trap. This is a part of the game that I do not appreciate, because it can be incredibly frustrating that all the time you spent trying to beat a minigame could be put to waste because of RNG. I don't understand why this is a thing they added here. Besides that, the next animatronic you need to repair is Freddy. You need to remove the children's belongings from Freddy's mouth and chest cavity, and you need to be especially careful when removing stuff from inside Freddy because his wiring is very sensitive. You also need to be careful when replacing his music box because moving too quickly will cause you to drop the music box and break it, though luckily you can replace it if that happens. Then you need to bip his boop to complete the maintenance. Last animatronic we gotta fix is Foxy. You have to put his head back onto his endoskeleton, plug control fuses into the terminals that match to the color pattern, and put his right eye back into its socket. But you can't take your eyes off him for too long, otherwise he'll jump scare you, and you also need to install the fuses in his body parts when they're not moving. On hard mode, they've made the visuals more distracting for Bonnie. For Chica, it's really dark, and there are these terrifying spiders in the background that I hate for the mere fact that they exist. Boing them! And the second time the bugs show up, you need to remove them by hand. There's just some creepy visuals with Freddy on hard mode. But Foxy is a little more difficult because the control fuses will change color and cause you to fail if you install them when they're a different color. Next on the agenda is vent repairs. The first vent has you pressing buttons, flipping switches, and turning valves to maintain a comfortable working environment. While you do this, you need to make sure Mangle doesn't make it to you by checking the vents. One thing I had a problem figuring out was the order in which you're supposed to press the colored buttons, which you can see if you look down into the shaft. Simple, but I like the feeling of being in this vent. The next vent repair has you inside of the secondary service elevator of Circus Baby's Entertainment and Rental. You're first taken to the breaker room, where you need to hit the button that goes to the corresponding breaker. But it's not that simple because the last person that went down here jumbled up the wires, so you need to follow the wire that goes to each breaker and press the buttons in the correct order. You have to do this 3 times, and the third time has a large room with innards, so you gotta do things fast. This is difficult to do because the room is so big and there's loose wires here that make the wires you're supposed to follow even harder to follow. But once you eventually reset the breakers, you'll get to this room with gears that you need to use to unblock other gear systems and get all 3 yellow cogs to install here like so. I probably did a terrible job explaining that, but think of one of those gear learning toys that you had as a kid, but in a horror game. I really like this section. After you beat that, you move on to the last section, which is the boiler room, where you need to rotate pipes for them to connect to each other. I just pushed buttons and it solved itself. This section is really easy. Good minigame, it's just a very weird difficulty curve. Switch over to hard mode, and the Mangle's vent repairs have 2 Mangles coming after you, and all 3 doors are open at once. Hard mode for innards repairs just flips the elevator upside down and adds some things to the breaker room section. The first one adds stuff to obstruct the wires. It's not really that difficult. The second set of breakers adds spider trap crawling on the ceiling that you need to be really fast with, otherwise you won't be able to follow the wires, so unless you memorized where the wires go, you might as well let him kill you to get another shot at it. The third set of breakers once again adds stuff to obstruct the wires, and this one part took me forever to finally beat. The other 2 sections were pretty much the same, though I was very confused by the gear section to where I needed to watch a video on it. Not really a fan of this. And finally, we have Night Terrors, which all take place in the FNAF 4 bedroom, and all have one character to deal with for each night. The first character to deal with is Funtime Freddy. Odd pick for this environment, but whatever. Bonnet, the female version of Freddy's hand puppet, will pop out of the drawers of your dressers, so you need to shine your flashlight at her to make her go away. I also love the cute little laugh she lets out when she goes away. I cannot stress the headpatability of this fucking Boonwee! You can teleport to the bed, either of your doors, or the closet to dispatch threats and or get your bearings. But you will be going to the doors for each one of these night terrors, so you're not going to have time to go to the bed. You need to go to the doors and listen for breathing. If you hear breathing at the door, then you need to shut the door until you hear Freddy laughing. Bonbon, Freddy's hand puppet, will show up at the end of the right hallway, and I believe you need to flicker your light at him to make him go away. Or maybe the detection is screwed to where it doesn't work as effectively as it does on Freddy when you need to get rid of him.
Yeah, I have no idea what the problem was with that. Sometimes Bonbon would leave if I had the light on him for a little bit, and sometimes he wouldn't leave no matter how long I held the light on him for.
Freddy can also get into your room, and you need to close the closet door on him if that happens. Much like the first 3 games, you need to survive until 6 AM, and you're good. Next up is Night Marionette. Much like Freddy, you need to check if they're at the door, but instead of a sound cue, you just need to look to see if they're at the door because you can see their glowing pupils. You also need to get rid of their tentacles that will poke out from underneath your bed, from the crack in the ceiling, and from your closet. The first time I played this minigame on my Quest 2, I had trouble figuring out how long you're supposed to hold your flashlight on their tentacles until you can't see them at all. I found this harder than it should be because you can't leave the tentacles even remotely there, otherwise your run is over. Any part of the room that tentacles can come from, make sure they're completely vacant from. After that, I needed to give that Bonnie plush I got as a prize a hug after I beat this minigame.
Boo, let go of me!
Next character we have to deal with is Circus Baby. This might be the simplest minigame from this whole collection. You're hiding in the closet and you need to shut the door if Baby looks at you. But you can't keep the door shut for too long because the plushies in the closet are going to kill you if you keep the door shut for too long. If Baby sees you, her eyes will turn red and she'll stand in front of the door until she gets bored and leaves.
Like I said, it's very simple, but I very much like this one.
And I like the alarm clock on the nightstand giving you an idea of how long you have until the night ends. And the last minigame in this whole collection has you surviving a FNAF 4 night with Nightmare Fredbear as the only animatronic you have to look out for. You need to check the halls for Fredbear and close the doors if you see his red eyes at the door to get rid of him. But if he gets into your room, you can shine your light on him until he goes away. And if he's in the closet, then you need to just shut the door, which you can tell if he's in the room if you hear his laugh. Alright, it's time for hard mode. Those night terrors were nothing. Let's flip that hard mode switch and see what a true nightmare looks like. Oh, it's a single minigame that doesn't seem to have any relation to the ones we already played. In any other context, I'd probably be pissed off at something like this, but the game is ending so I can see why this is here. Pizza Party has you wandering through a conglomeration of the different locations until you get to the pizza party like in the title. I had no idea what I was doing here. I got jump scared by Plush Trap once by walking through this door, and I got jump scared by Bonnie by waiting around in the left hall from FNAF 1. I was going to complain about this part taking a long time for me to beat, but it only took me 11 minutes and 6 seconds to get to the pizza party, which is counting those 2 failed runs. You get to the pizza party, and when you eat the cake, the strange looking bunny gestures at you to come through the curtain, and the game ends with you on the stage, and that bunny dancing around the main menu as the credits roll. And hey, since I have the mic, don't mind if I do.
And it seems such a waste of time to be drinking while my mother is tired and my father soaking into his chair. They've had enough of my share of promising it's the last time, of thinking I won't fail if I try. Last chance we make it out there. Last chance we get out there.
But I've been tiptoeing around this unknown bunny for the longest time, so I guess we need to talk about him now. This is Glitch Trap. There are hidden tapes that you can collect throughout the game that tell you that he's a malicious AI that the developers of the Fazbear Virtual Experience found when they were scanning old circuit boards to make the game. He'll show up in the main menu and wave at you, or just stare at you. He'll get closer as you collect Faz tokens and tapes. For a while, it was presumed that Glitchtrap was William Afton, but there's also a theory from ID's Fantasy that Glitchtrap is actually two entities, William Afton and the Mimic. The Vanny mask from the Ruin DLC and Security Breach doesn't look like the one Vanny actually has in the base game, and instead looks like the one from Princess Quest III and the DLC from this game. In Princess Quest III, you need 2 items to get the key to beat the game, which also seems to break Vanessa loose from her mind control as Vanny. The Vanny mask and a green rabbit plush you get from one of this game's endings that represents Glitchtrap when you defeat him. The Vanny mask represents the Mimic because of its ability to access the Pizzaplex systems, and the green rabbit plush represents William because of his alter ego as Springtrap, which I think is an interesting theory, but I'm not sure if I fully believe it. And since I mentioned that this game has multiple endings, let's get into those. When you get to the pizza party, there's another door you can go through, and you're brought outside where it's snowing, and you see a building under construction that I'm willing to bet is the Pizzaplex from Security Breach. I think this is a fun detail that I'm sure got people excited for what else Steelwool was going to do with this franchise. Just wish we could have been rewarded for that excitement. If you get all the tapes, Tape Girl will tell you to push the button and flip the switch, and you'll find yourself in whatever this room is, as Glitchtrap tells you to be quiet. And you'll return to the main menu with a Glitchtrap plushie next to you. And if you beat the game, you'll get access to the gallery where you can view the character models of the animatronics. It's really cool to be able to look at these robots without having them kill you. But this model viewer isn't without some quirks. For starters, the black background makes it so some characters are difficult to see, like the puppets or Nightmare Bonnie. Some characters do have some sort of blue light reflecting off their backs, but the puppet and Night Marionette do not have this, when it would have really helped make them stand out against the black background so I could see them better. For some reason, Foxy still has the remnants of the control fuse terminals that Steelwool forgot to remove. And for some reason, Circus Baby is the biggest animatronic despite her not actually being that big in the game she's from. Like, goddamn, she's the size of Lady D. And lastly, you can find a tape and coin in the drawers here. But we're still not done here, because this game has DLC called The Curse of Dreadbear that you access by hitting the button in the candy pail. The first set of minigames are called Afraid of the Dark, and the first minigame is a reskinned version of the Plush Baby minigame. The next one is Pirate Ride, where you shoot targets and get a high score. The targets are different colors to designate how many points you'll get from each one. I also like the ending where Foxy says the real treasure was friendship and wishes you a happy birthday, which would be great if I wasn't born in August. I also love the art on the cutouts, and I like the beginning where Foxy gives a little introduction to this minigame. The voice he's given is great, and it's refreshing to see one of these animatronics be an animatronic for once. The only complaint I have is that the cannon doesn't have any sight or reticle of any kind. The corn maze has you looking for keys while avoiding Foxy. Unlike most of the minigames here, this game allows you to move freely and turn by hitting the buttons on the move controllers. The movement is not as intuitive as you'd hope, because it's the move controller and the button mapping takes time to get accustomed to. You also move slowly and don't have a sprint button, but you can hold the trigger to hide in one of these maze cutouts. If you grab all 5 keys, you can open the cellar in the middle and find a Vanny mask, which takes you back to the title of the DLC, and you can also check this mask out when you go to the prize counter, but you can also use the keys to exit one of the gates in this maze. Next up is the Spooky Mansion, with the first minigame being the hallway crawl. You have to cross a really long hallway while stopping so you don't get jump scared by Chica, Bonnie, or Foxy. But you have to keep moving, otherwise you'll get jump scared by Freddy. It feels like the only thing you have to win this is luck, which I feel is just bullshit. Next is Build-A-Mangle, where you grab parts that are on the screens from the conveyor belts and toss them down the chute. But if you don't toss the right parts into the chute or don't put enough parts down it, then you'll get jump scared by Mangle. Trick or Treat has you knocking at the door or ringing the doorbell so one of the animatronics answers the door. You need to look through the windows to determine who will answer the door, and you need to wear the appropriate mask so you don't get jump scared. Do this a couple times and you'll get rewarded with candy. It's a damn shame I can't do this anymore. The Dreadbear minigame has you programming a brain for Dreadbear by matching the colors and size according to the diagram, and making sure it has the proper feedback response by plugging it in, pushing the button to see the brainwaves you need to match, and turning the dials until the brainwaves match. Then put the brain in Dreadbear's head, and you're done. You have to be quick while doing this, because the equipment will shut off after a while, so you need to turn it back on by throwing the switch, but if you do that too much, Dreadbear will jump scare you. I initially had no idea what I was supposed to do to finish this procedure, because how was I supposed to know that I was supposed to plug in the brain to match the brainwaves with instructions like this?
Use the laboratory tools to adjust the brain's vital characteristics. Use the blueprints as a guide for matching the correct colors, size, and neurofeedback loop.
It also doesn't help that in this time-sensitive situation, I have to fiddle with the probe to get it in. You know what I mean. But this is a pretty cool minigame. I love the idea of being able to feel like I'm making my own Frankenstein creation in VR. And the last page of minigames is Keep Out. This is pretty much a revamped version of FNAF 1 with only 3 nights. Jacko Bonnie and Jacko Chica will come to your doors and whack the boards that cover up the entrances to your office. You need to hit the light button to scare them away from your office. Night 2 adds Grim Foxy to the mix, who you need to shine the camera light on, which is something that you can do with Bonnie and Chica on the cameras. Using the lights drains 20% of your power every time you use it, but you can restore all power if you flip the breaker, but this will make all your equipment inoperable for a few seconds, so you need to make sure nothing is coming for you before you flip the breaker. Night 3 adds Dreadbear, and he won't go back to his starting position if you use any of the lights on him. It's best that you look for him on the cameras and use the camera light the second you see him on the cameras. The Curse of Dreadbear DLC is pretty neat, but flawed in some aspects. Some mechanics aren't explained well, and having to rely on luck is never a good thing for a video game. I do like the festive atmosphere, and it really does put me in the spirit for Halloween. And overall, this game is pretty good. Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted is a fun collection of mini-games based on Five Nights at Freddy's. There are some games that I like more than others, and some aspects that I'm not a fan of, but I think you'll get a kick out of this if you're a fan of the franchise. That's all for now. Thanks for watching, and have a happy Halloween.